Hello everyone and welcome to round 7, or rather round 8. Yeah, this is round 8 of the 2021 Norway Chess. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Rapport, and Rapport is still leading the tournament. Magnus is trailing and Rapport has a 3.5 point lead. So if you remember, in the first half of the tournament, Rapport lost to Magnus, but not in the classical time section. In the classical, they drew the game and then Magnus won the Armageddon game. So now, if Rapport can hold Magnus to a draw or even win the game in classical, that's not only going to do wonders for his rating, but also, well, just propel him further away into the world top 5 of the classical chess elite. So it's quite a game, a lot to cover. Let's check it out. And don't worry, we are going to cover all of the games that were played today. So Magnus has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have e5 by Rapport, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5, going for the Ruy Lopez, and knight to f6. The Berlin defense is on the board. We have d3, and now Rapport already goes for a beautiful surprise move. So here you either play d6, so sort of a closed system, or play bishop to d5, bishop to c5 before closing the position with the d6. But Rapport plays knight to e7. It's a very nice move. It's called the Mortimer variation of the Berlin, and it kind of offers the e5 pawn, but you can't grab this pawn. This is not why this is played. If you grab the pawn, then we just win a piece here. We just play c6 and it's game over. Black wins. So your bishop is attacked. You have to move it. It doesn't matter where you move it. Just queen a5 check, and then you lose this greedy knight on e5. So of course Magnus doesn't go for this after knight e7. He did consider the position for some time because there's so much to consider. You could go knight to c3, you could play bishop back to c4, as you know that c6 is coming. You could strike in the center with the d4. Yes, it loses you a tempo, but black also lost a tempo by playing knight to e7. But Magnus just calmly castles. And now what do you play here? Well, c6, of course, this is in all of the lines. Bishop to a4, and now knight to g6. So the two knights are now very nicely placed on the king side, and you will have very nice support. If you ever want to execute d5, the bishop will be developed somewhere, e7, c5, and then you're going to castle, and you will have a very enjoyable game. So here, Magnus, again, spent some time, played rook to e1, and now bishop to e7. We have d4, not waiting any longer, and now comes d6. So just defending this pawn, and now you could capture this, but this doesn't really do anything for you. Just captures. You could trade queens, but black is very happy here. White achieved really nothing. Black still has the bishop pair, and well, there are no weaknesses in the position. So instead, Magnus just continues with c3, and now Rapport castles. We have knight b to d2, and the situation on the clock is both players are playing relatively fast. Rapport has some 10 minutes more on the clock than Magnus. We have h6, and now knight to f1. Magnus's knight is also coming to g3. We have rook to e8, and now knight to g3, and now a5. Will be used later on for b5 to be executed, and it prevents white from going b4, a4, and so on. So here, bishop back to c2, and now queen to c7. So just nicely developing pieces. We have a4 by Magnus, and now bishop to d7. Preparing rook to b8, and then b5, and starting to play on the queen side. We have h3 by Magnus, and now comes b5. So striking in the here on the queen side. And now what do you play? Well, Magnus says, all right, I don't really care about this. You can push b4 if you want to. I'm just going to continue development. Bishop to e3, and now rook 8 to b8. So now you know that b4 is coming. Magnus plays queen to d2, prepares for this, and now b4. So what can you play here? Well, you could maybe advance the pawn all the way to c4, but then you allow a move like b3 could be a very annoying pawn later on. So instead we have bishop to d3, now saying, all right, if you want to push this pawn all the way, you can, but now it doesn't really come with tempo. So, I mean, it is possible, but then we can play bishop to c4, and you know it could become a liability. You can only defend this pawn with pieces, not with pawns. So instead, after bishop to d3, we have b captures on c3 by Rapport, b captures, and now bishop to e6. We have queen to c2 by Magnus. Now, rooks are probably getting doubled on the b file, so Magnus wants to have some support on the b1 square, but also adding more support to the e4 square. So, rook to b7, and now knight to f1. We have knight to h5, going after this, well, very nice f4 square. A knight will do wonders there, and then maybe some attacking chances will be possible. Knight to f4, maybe bishop captures on h3, knight captures, you know, sacrifice something, start an attack against Carlsen's king. Maybe if queen comes to d7, could become very, very good for him. So knight to d2, now going for that c4 square, and now knight h to f4. So attacking the bishop here. Of course, we're not going to just give up our light square bishop. So bishop to a6, trying to trick Rapport a little bit, but the Rapport doesn't, of course, fall for it. It's not a big trick, but it is a little trick. Here, for example, if you go rook to b6, then we just bring the bishop back, bishop to f1, and now we have a lot of threats here, like d5, attacking the bishop and the rook here, and now black would have to waste a move, and then, well, it's sort of like we've won a move. Black's position did not change, and we got our bishop to f1, and now we can play something like rook e to b1. So a slight improvement it would be. But okay, rook b back to b8 by Rapport, and now Magnus trades in the center. D captures on e5, d captures, and now rook a to b1. So countering Black's rook on b8, and now bishop back to d7. And here the situation on the clock is Magnus some 38 minutes on the clock, Rapport some 31 minutes on the clock. I know a lot of you guys really just want to start grabbing here on h3, but we don't have any support. For example, if captures with check king h2, there's no good way to continue this attack. There's really nothing for us here. So we need a few more moves to prepare if such an idea can even be considered. So after bishop to d7, Magnus has to decide whether he wants to go with the knight to c4, which is kind of what Rapport is planning after bishop to d7, but he doesn't. He abandons the plan of knight to c4 and just brings the bishop back. If knight to c4, we can just play bishop back to e6. And now, yes, you can go to b6. It seems like a very nice square, but the tactics work in Black's favor. We can just capture this bishop, and after knight captures, bishop to c5. Now we're attacking the knight twice, and once the knight moves, let's say knight to c4, now we play queen to a7, and now we have an attack on the bishop and an attack on this f2 pawn. But not only that, okay, the queen guards the f2 pawn, but the bishop here does not have a way out. How are you gonna save this bishop? So that's the kind of thing that lurks in the position. So Magnus abandons this, he goes bishop back to c4, and now we have knight to e6. Now this knight is coming all the way to f8, and then maybe we're going to have a bishop trade along this diagonal. So queen to a2, now Magnus says, nope, this knight is not moving an inch, otherwise bishop captures on f7 is coming, and now knight to h4. So also a plan, just trading off a pair of knights. Magnus says, okay, we have knight captures bishop, captures, and now knight to f3, again forcing this bishop to move back, bishop to e7, and now rook b to d1, so shifting the rook from the open b file to the open d file, and this bishop is now only defended by the queen, so the queen could become overloaded if not careful. So bishop back to c8 by Rapport, and now queen to c2 by Magnus. So now the queen bishop battery no longer exists here, and Rapport takes this opportunity to shift his knight over to f8, and now the bishop will be reactivated via the e6 square. So rook to d2 by Magnus, and now bishop to e6. We have queen back to a2. He's saying, okay, if you want to trade here, we can trade, but I want my queen to capture on c4, so I have constant pressure on c6. It's a weak pawn, so, you know, definitely that's how we're gonna trade. So rook e to d8, offering a trade of rooks here, and Magnus just captures. We have rook captures, bishop captures, and now rook to d1. Bishop back to e7, and now as you can see, Black is holding the position very nicely. Not much is happening here, but he has to thread very carefully, and Magnus just grabs more space with h4 as he usually does. We have rook to d8, offering a trade of rooks, but Magnus declines and just goes back, rook to b1. He says, all right, if you want to trade, we can trade, but we're going to trade on b8. So Rapport goes back, we have rook to b8, and now Magnus goes for the trade. Rook captures, queen captures, and now g3. Now the pawns are nicely defended, and now the knight can move. You don't have to keep an eye on the h4 pawn. And now we have bishop to d8. Like I said, if you trade here, this only helps white. You're going to have constant pressure on this pawn, and you're going to, well, not there, obviously, but Black has a lot of pawns here to defend. White also has a lot of pawns here to defend. If you consider it, it's basically a symmetrical pawn structure. But white is, if this exchange would occur, white would have a lot more space to go with. So after g3, we have bishop to d8, now shifting the bishop over to this diagonal, and now king to g2 by Magnus. So improving the position of the king a little bit. Bishop to c7, and only now, after all of the options were sort of depleted, Magnus goes for this trade. Bishop captures, knight captures, and now the queen lands on c4. So now we're putting pressure on this pawn, and black has to defend it. How do you do it? Queen b8, queen to a8, queen to e8. All of this is defending the pawn. Rapport chooses the e8 square, and now Magnus just grabs more space on the king side, as he usually does. And now king to h7. And interestingly, both players are already down to 10 minutes, and we've reached move 40, so we do have increment, but it's not easy playing under these conditions, definitely. So here Magnus goes queen to d3, and this was a special moment in the game. He could avoid giving black this opportunity by playing something like knight to e1 or knight to d2, just moving the knight first. But he played queen to d3, and he allowed Rapport a very, very sneaky maneuver, but Rapport doesn't go for it. Maybe he didn't see it, maybe he saw it and he didn't want to allow the position to open up. It's hard to imagine if you see such a move that you don't play it. So here Rapport played queen to e7, but f5 is the move that I might even use this as a thumbnail. F5 is the move that Rapport did not play. Like I said, I have not heard any interviews, so maybe he saw it, maybe he just decided against it, but it seems deadly, because what do you play? If you capture on f5, then just e4, and black, well, is close to winning. Either you're going to lose material, or you capture here, and then you lose even more material. This comes with check, the knight is defended, and you will lose the queen here. There is no defense here. You have to capture. There's really nothing here. You can capture like this, and then after bishop captures, you will have bishop and knight for a queen, but there are so many pawns all over the board that this is no compensation for white. So what you would have to do after f5 is not capture this pawn. There's no question about it. We cannot capture this, but then again, if you just ignore it, there's really no good way to play, and f4 is coming. Whatever white plays, f4 is coming. So maybe something that the Rapport could have gone for. But okay, after queen d3, he played queen to e7, and now Magnus moves the knight. Probably he spotted that, you do not want to meet f5 with the knight being on f3, but also we kind of want to get it here, attacking some of the pawns here. So bishop to d6, and now knight to c4. Rapport goes back, bishop to c7, keep an eye on the pawn, and nicely controlling all of the squares that the knight can jump to, and now queen to d1. Now Magnus wants to shift the queen into the attack with queen to g4, queen to f5 check. We have knight to f8, and still queen to g4. We have knight to d7, maybe with an idea of shifting the knight over to f6, but now king to f1. Magnus just checking to see probably what Rapport will do, because there's no rush. You can always play queen to f5. There's nothing black can do about this. Now you can't even play queen f6 because the knight would hang. So here, queen to e8, and now king back to g2 by Magnus, queen to e7, Rapport repeats the position, and only now queen to f5 check, king to g8, and now g4. So just grabbing more space here and preparing g5. We have knight to f8. You do not want this knight to remain a target here, and now Magnus advances his pawn, g5. And you can see that for the moment, Carlsen's knight is doing, a lot more than Rapport's knight, and his bishop is doing more than Rapport's bishop. So even though the engine gives this position as a dead draw, but if you're a human, it's a bit more pleasant to have this position with white than with black. So h captures on g5, bishop captures, attacking the queen here, and now queen to c5, and this is already maybe giving Magnus a bit too much wiggle room. Maybe f6 here, and then just ask white, what do you do here? Now the bishop has to move. There aren't any moves that you can throw in between, and then maybe only after this, then we play queen to f7, and then we prepare some pawn pushes. Maybe we threaten the knight here. So also an option. Well, okay, the time on the clock is low. Queen to c5 was played, and now attacking the knight, knight back to e3. And now Magnus says, do gobble up the c3 pawn, I dare you. But if the pawn is captured, then h6 can be very, very annoying. How do you meet such a move? It's well, it's just very ugly, but you don't even have to push h6 right away. Maybe even knight to g4 can come, and then all sorts of ideas become possible here in front of the black king. So of course Rapport doesn't grab that, he just goes back, queen to d6. Now with more control over the h6 square, and now Magnus goes queen to g4. Now he says, all right, now the g file, if it opens up, I'm going to have some very nasty discoveries here. And the situation on the clock is Magnus some 3 minutes on the clock, Rapport some 2 minutes on the clock. So g6, Rapport offers the trade here, and now it's a position where Magnus really has to consider a lot of things with the time on the clock being very low. So here, if you capture, black's going to capture, and how do you continue here? It's a very nice position for white, that's for sure, but is it, you know, nice enough? That's the question. Magnus decides against this. He plays bishop to h6 first. Now the g file is, well, it would be very unfortunate for black if it opens up, but he also wants to trade bishop for knight, because that's a very, very strong defender. So, of course, Rapport prevents this. He plays knight to d7, and now we're basically down to 1 minute, and now we're kind of having a bullet game with increment. So knight to c4, attacking the queen here, and now Rapport is in a bit of a pickle here, because his queen is attacked, and also if the queen moves too far, then the knight hangs. So the only move for black is queen to e6, offering a queen trade, but it's also giving up a pawn for the moment. Just captures, and h captures, and g6. But not really, because black can win it with knight to c5. Now we're attacking both of these pawns. So it would probably be playable for black. However, Rapport said, all right, you attacked my queen, I'm very low on the clock, I have to attack your queen. There is, of course, nothing better. There is, but not with little time on the clock. But now the position is winning for Magnus. However, there is only one move that wins the game. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on taking down the leader of the tournament. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is queen to c8 with check. That's the good stuff. And now, of course, the king cannot move because the black queen would be lost. So we have to block with the queen. It's the only way to continue the game. Now Magnus trades, queen captures, bishop captures, and now the only move that wins the game, you kind of had to see this if you went queen to c8 check, bishop to g5. That's the good stuff. So what do you play here? Black is completely tied down, and you don't really have a good move here. If king to g7, then we just play h6 check, and the king will not be defending this knight. So g captures on h5 was played, but now just bishop captures on f6. Even this is sufficient, and here the knight will be superior to the bishop. Bishop captures on f6, now knight captures on a5, and that's the point of the combination. Create a passed a pawn that's seemingly unstoppable. Or maybe it is unstoppable. So king to f8, Rapport, of course, starts marching with his king. Knight captures on c6. There's no way to defend the pawn. It's on a light square. We have king to e8. Now comes knight to b4. We have bishop to d8, preventing the a pawn from marching forward. Now knight to d3, going after the e5 pawn, and now f6 defending this pawn. So Magnus is up a pawn, but also the h5 pawn looks very weak. How are you stopping this pawn from being captured? It's a very, very hard position. So king to g3 by Magnus, king to d7. We have f3, improving the position a little bit. Now comes bishop to a5, attacking the pawn here, and now c4. And you don't really have to worry. The black king is kind of close, but as you can see, the pawns and the knight are completely controlling all of the squares here, so there's no way for the black king to, you know, reach any of them. So king to e6, and now king to h4. Rapport has to play something. He plays f5, king captures on h5. We have captures, and now king to d6, but now king to g6. We have bishop to c7, and now just king to f5. going after this pawn here. So here, king to c6, but now Magnus doesn't rush with capturing of the e5 pawn, because it could be a little bit dangerous, you know. The knight captures, then you allow king to c5, so why would you allow this? So instead, Magnus just brings the king into the game with king to e6, and now king to b6. We have king to d7, not going after the pawn, of course, and now we have bishop to b8. And here, Magnus just played c5, this comes with check, and he was in this position on move 77 that Richard Rapport resigned the game and suffered his first loss in the classical time format. He's still leading the tournament, but Magnus caught up to him, so now Rapport is leading only by a half a point, and Magnus is currently in second place. So we're going to discuss the standings a little bit more, because like I said, we're going to check out the other two games as well, but now there's nothing for you to do here. You have to resign. All of these three squares are covered by the white king, and you're going to start pushing that pawn forward. There's simply nothing to do. If you play something like king b7, we're just going to deliver c6 check, and if king to b6, yes, you're now covering this square, but then a5 check. So there's really nothing to play here. You have to move the king away. These squares are covered, so you have to go back. Now we play c7, and after this is captured, knight captures on e5, and now of course the passed e-pawn is completely winning. So of course Rapport knows this. He knows this for quite a while now. As soon as they entered the endgame, he knew it, but he had to try. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, we're gonna cover all of them, and like I said, Rapport is still leading the tournament by a half-point margin. So 2 more rounds to go. If Rapport can do his thing and continue winning in the classical time section like he did for the entire tournament so far, then he could still win the tournament. We'll see what happens. Definitely, I would say he's definitely the favorite to win it, but we'll see. A lot can happen in 2 rounds. So, once again, hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Steven Schönli, ustock8.com, customchess.com, Tom Derolo, and Isaac Hitzgraf for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the rest of the games, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.